There are always people who will second guess the negotiators, but they're not in the room. They don't understand the real situation. I think that this was probably the best deal that could be achieved for all parties, not just for the United States and its P5+1 partners. I think this was a good deal for Iran and a good deal for the United States. It was a surprisingly good deal. Before the round started, and even on March 30th, the target date for completing the negotiations, there were some very dire predictions and suggestions that maybe the talks might even collapse. But I think with a few days of very hard work and no sleep, the negotiators managed to come up with a result that was quite complete and quite detailed. So I think the result was better than expected.
You said that you think it's a good understanding for the United States as well. However, you've heard the skeptics. They are saying that the U.S. gave too many concessions to Iran. You think so?
Look, in any negotiation, you never achieve your opening position. The nature of negotiation is that all sides have to make compromises. I think that some of the far-reaching solutions that members of Congress, that some other countries have recommended would be desirable, but they're simply not achievable. And one has to compare the result that is achievable with the alternatives. And I think this result compares very well to the realistic alternatives.
You mentioned some countries' opposition to what has been so far they've come to the understanding about, which is not final yet, is Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister insists that the Fordo site be shut down completely. Is that a realistic wish?
I don't think it's realistic. Frankly, the Fordo facility contributes very little to Iran's civil nuclear program. I think its original purpose was to contribute to a nuclear weapons program, but I think the safeguards that have been agreed to for the Fordo facility will ensure that it will not be used in a nuclear weapons program. I think the restrictions are very substantial, and I don't think it's necessary to dismantle the facility in order to be confident that Iran will not use it for nuclear weapons.
Well, there are so many different elements in the understanding right now. For example, one on the shipment of the uranium stockpile and also the plutonium stockpile. Will that really give the international community the peace of mind that, all right, Iran will not have enough material, fissile material within the country to go that way, whereas even if it does so, then it could procure it from elsewhere?
No single element of the deal gives peace of mind. I think you have to look at all of the elements together. So, for example, you mentioned having a low limit on the amount of low-enriched uranium stocks that Iran can keep. That's an important contribution, a very important contribution. But it has to be looked at in the context also of a reduction in the number of Iranian centrifuges that will be enriching uranium, a provision that those 5,060 centrifuges will only be the first generation centrifuge and not any advanced centrifuges. These are the kinds of things that contribute to confidence that this program cannot produce nuclear weapons. Similarly, the plutonium. All of the spent fuel from this reactor at Arak will leave the country. And there's a provision that there be no reprocessing facilities that could be used in a covert scenario to separate out plutonium from spent fuel. So I think that provides extra safeguards against the plutonium path to nuclear weapons.
Why not, why couldn't or shouldn't have the international negotiators convinced Iran to convert Iraq's heavy water reactor into a light water reactor, when, again, that have given more peace of mind?
Sure. I can construct an agreement that would give total peace of mind, but such an agreement is not achievable. In this case, it would be desirable to convert the heavy water to light water reactor, but it's not essential. I think with the constraints that have been agreed to, including the major redesign of the reactor to produce much less plutonium in the spent fuel, that the need to reduce the nuclear weapons threat has been met.
Mr. Einhorn, the sanctions element in this issue is somewhat vague. The international side has offered its version. Iran, or I should say, maybe Iran has offered its version, which doesn't necessarily go with what the international community has said. Now, the understanding says that U.S. EU-related sanctions will be suspended, which is one key word. It's not. It will not be lifted. They will not be lifted after the IAEA verifies that Iran has taken all the necessary steps. And then there are the UN sanctions. I did not see any reference with regards to the Security Council resolutions that it requires the IAEA verification of Iran having taken those steps.
For sure, the U.S. Will be reluctant and unwilling to lift sanctions until the IAEA verifies that Iran has taken the necessary steps. At this stage, though, it's clear that there are disagreements on the timing of sanctions relief. So it's not surprising that you're hearing differing accounts from both Washington and Tehran. I think over time this will have to be resolved. But of the various issues that have been discussed publicly, this is the one where differences of interpretation of what has been achieved have been greatest. It's simply an indication that this is an unresolved issue and will have to be worked on.
Is the order of which sanctions also a matter of an unresolved matter? Is the UN sanctions, are they the ones that are going to be lifted first and then US and EU, or do we know at all?
I think this is not yet resolved. I think we'll have to be patient and see what the negotiators come up with.
Right. And what mechanism will there be, do you think, regarding the Security Council resolutions to lift those? How is that going to happen?
Well, Security Council sanctions can only be removed by Security Council action. And negotiators have talked about one or more new Security Council resolutions. There would be a resolution that would endorse the agreement to remove some existing sanctions, to replace them with certain kinds of restraints. So this, I guess, is not yet resolved. So it's not surprising that this is not clear to us.
Does it make any difference which sanctions will be lifted first, the international ones or the unilateral ones?
Well, it's interesting. From Iran's economic perspective, it would be most valuable to lift the U.S. National sanctions on banking and oil. Those sanctions, the removal of those sanctions, would give the greatest boost to Iran's economy. On the other hand, Iran seems especially focused on removal of the UN Security Council sanctions, which do have some important practical effects, but for Iran, I think, have significant symbolic effects because they symbolize the international community isolating Iran, and they would like those sanctions to be lifted as soon as possible.
And for clarification purposes,
we have about a minute left. I really have to go. I have to get across town at a meeting, and within 15 minutes I have to leave.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Are the sanctions going to be lifted in phases, do you think?
It's always been the U.S. view that that sanctions easing be a phased process as Iran meets its nuclear obligations. So as it meets its performance targets, the sanctions would be eased. So it's a gradual process from the U.S. perspective, but from the Iranian perspective, they would like to see it much sooner and immediately if possible.
Right. And finally, I know you're among a good number of individuals who back this understanding. However, on the other side, for example, Daniel Pletka says that this understanding is the death knell of the NPT. Do you agree with that?
I really don't agree with that assessment. I think this agreement, if effective, could be the salvation of the NPT. A real concern over recent years was the implication of Iran's nuclear program for the future of nonproliferation. If this deal effectively prevents Iran from having nuclear weapons, this would be a great boost to the future of the nonproliferation regime.